In Gabon, a civil society group is calling on the government to resign. This following the shooting death of 2 people by the police for protesting Thursday. They are accused of violating lockdown measures imposed by the government to contain the spread of the coronavirus. But Laurence NDONG, head of an organization called Let's Turn the Page, says it appears the administration is using the lockdown to curb any dissent. She argues that the rate of infection and death due to the coronavirus are so low they make the lockdown unjustifiable. Rather, she adds, the government should intensify efforts to educate the public about globally accepted practices that help curb the illness, including social distancing, mask wearing, and frequent hand washing. Supporters of the government say the imposition of the lockdown is the reason why the infection rate is low. They are urging citizens to follow the measures to protect themselves and their families. They also condemn as unpatriotic what they say is the opposition's use of the pandemic to drive down the administration's popularity. Civil society leader Laurence NDONG tells me that the shooting deaths of the 2 people are unacceptable.
The authorities in Gabon are using the COVID-19 pandemic to restrict freedoms. The COVID-19 test is required to travel within the country, to go to a restaurant, or even to enter a shop. A curfew has been instituted from 6 p.m. The number of places on transport has been reduced, and it takes much longer for people to get home. As the road network is poorly developed, huge traffic jams are created at the end of work, and those who are unlucky enough to be outside after 6 p.m. are violently assaulted by the forces of law and order. So, a watchword has been launched inviting the population to make noise by banking on pots and pans every evening from 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. Just 5 minutes. As part of this action, young people went out into the street with their pots and pans. They didn't break anything. They just made noise. The police arrived and opened fire. 2 young people were killed last night.
But Laurence, the curfew, the government says, was imposed to ensure that people are protected from the coronavirus. That is why the lockdown was imposed, to stop the spread of the disease. Why are people just not respecting it? Why do you blame the government for imposing it?
Since the beginning of the pandemic, Gabon has recorded 75 deaths for a population of 2 million people. 13,000 people tested positive and nearly 1,000 active cases. Do these statistics justify a curfew? At the same time, small shops and businesses have been closed without compensation. The 6 p.m. curfew is causing more problems for many businesses, which will have to close. Not forgetting those that have already closed since the introduction of these measures last year. In fact, the population feels more mistreated than protected by the measures taken by this government. To escape the curfew, people are piling up along the roads, desperately waiting for a means of transport to get home. Far from protecting the population, these measures increase the precariousness, the conducive to the spread of the virus.
Opposition and civil society groups, including yours, are demanding an immediate investigation into the shooting death of these 2 young people. What has been the response of the government so far that you've heard about?
The spokesman for the ruling party made a statement today blaming the opposition for what happened last night. All protests are repressed in blood. There is never any investigation. The demonstrators are always guilty of having demonstrated. For this regime, demonstrating is a crime for which there is demand and enforced. That is why it's more than urgent that the Gabonese people get rid of this regime.
But Laurence, isn't the opposition behind these protests to undermine the government? Because supporters of the government are saying the imposition of the lockdown is to protect the people.
The opposition is not behind this action. No one knows who gave the order. The information spread through social networks and the population followed. This government is never responsible for anything. I would remind you that it is not just the curfew that is being contested, but the whole set of measures. And as I told you, in the light of the COVID-19 statistics in Gabon, these measures are not justified at all.
So, Laurence, what do you think is the best way forward to contain the disease in Gabon?
What government must do is listen to the people, which it never does. The contested measures are not there to protect the people. In Gabon, the COVID-19 crisis amplified the failings of the regime. And it's not the 6 p.m. curfew or other restriction on freedoms that will change that. Drinking water is a scarce commodity. They have never provided masks to the population, to cite just these two examples. A health problem cannot be solved by security measures alone. Let him lift these measures, and better yet, let him resign.
Laurence NDONG is the head of an organization called Let's Turn the Page in Gabon. She spoke with me from Paris, France.